lines are open. Dial 384-2191.
Sure, you can give us a call today. We're on the Inside program here on WDLB this third Friday of the month. That means he avails himself to us. Wood County Board Chairman Lance Plimmel, glad to have you back again.
Good morning. As you stated earlier, I kind of sailed up here. That wind is unbelievable.
It is. It has been unnecessary, as I said before. I don't think there's any need to have wind that strong.
Yeah, there were garbage cans blowing across the highways coming up. If I was down south, or out west, it would have been tumbleweeds. But yeah, it's pretty brutal, and it hasn't ended. I mean, spring is not sprung, and it's. I just can't believe this. There's years, we've been out golfing already for a month in this area, and right now I'm dealing with when's it going to snow next.
Yeah, well, as you're watching us here, they were recording this on a Easter or Good Friday and on Easter weekend. So if you remember, when you look back, that was a cold one. I can remember times it's been 60 or easy, if not even
60, 70 little girls in Easter bonnets walking out there in little dresses. And now you're going to be bundled up in a winter coat, gloves, and a hat. It's pretty tough.
I guess so. Talking with the county board chairman, do you have new seats? Do you have new people to swear in? How does that work now?
Yes, we do. You had all those local elections, just occurred here a week ago-ish. There are a few recounts that are occurring in some of the other counties. We don't have any going on in Wood County right now. But, up here in Marshfield, obviously, you have a new mayor. The county board will have three new supervisors, I guess. We have kind of an interesting change. We had a couple of elections, and a few of those who have been elected now were previous county board supervisors, whether it had been in Wood County or in another county, so they come with experience. We'll have a third member coming on that ran in a district that was no candidate declared, so we have the ability to appoint in that district. So it's going to be interesting. Every time you see a new board, it changes the dynamic a little bit. But in Wood County, we had very little change. Marathon County, huge change. I believe they have 17 seats flipped. Some of those were probably vacated by incumbents, but nonetheless, 17 new members is very difficult to deal with, as well as Portage County had a lot, Lincoln County, some of the surrounding areas. And, the tough part, Jeff, is so as we go through the process, the election happened Tuesday. We elect our county board leadership this coming Tuesday. Committee assignments will happen right after that. And then you start realizing where you're going to sit and what areas you're going to have expertise in. And it takes minimally 2 years for county board supervisors to get a grasp of what the entire county operation is. I mean, you might be assigned to, let's say, the Park, Forestry, and Highway Committee, which is called the HIRC Committee, Highway Infrastructure Recreation Committee. And you might get a pretty good feeling of what they do. But county services are broad in nature, and by the time you understand, what human services does, or what our court systems do, or the veteran service programs, planning and zoning, it takes a couple of years to really get your arms around that. And so the first couple of years, you really do rely on some of those more experienced supervisors to provide some guidance, some mentoring, help bring you along. And if you had to deal with 17 new ones, like you're going to have in Marathon County, that's difficult because there is that historic knowledge, that intellectual property that was brought along with incumbents does help. Now, that doesn't mean you should never have change, but that means it's difficult at the start always.
So at that point now, what happens here? You said they become members after the initiation, or what do you call it?
So what will occur is on Tuesday, normally the county board chairman starts the meeting, but as of Tuesday at the start of the meeting, there is no county board chairman. So the county clerk runs the meeting, and that's by county board rule. So they'll start the meeting, they'll elect a chairman, a vice chairman, and a second vice chairman. That'll occur at that meeting. Then we'll go through the regular course of business like we always do. And then it's always been, when I have been county board chairman, I've always brought in the vice chair and the second vice chair, and we sit down and we look at committee appointments. Now, I would be lying to you if I said for the last week I haven't looked at all of these committees, where people sat, where they might fit well going forward, and have a template, in the event you're reelected. And then we sit down with those other individuals, the second vice chair, the vice chair, and we put together a committee list. As soon as that is issued, I believe they have about 72 hours to meet the first time to elect their chairman, so the chairman of the committee. And then we're up and running. So it's a lot of puzzle pieces to put together. I mean, you think of the main committees within a county, and there's a lot. Like I said, you deal with all those departments that I just mentioned with, but then there's a whole bunch of different committees that are somewhat ancillary to county government, but they're extremely important. The workforce development boards, the library boards, commissions, all of those wildlife committees, all those things that aren't full-on county committees where you have 5 members, all have a member. And we have a lot of consortiums where we deal with, cross county lines. The Aging Disability Resource Center would be a great example. You have 4 counties, and you have representation of those. So it's a process that takes a little while, and you try to get the right people in the right place, and you try to balance their areas of interest along with their areas of expertise. It doesn't make sense sometimes to have somebody who's an expert in construction or a bricklayer doing accounting while you have the accountant working construction. So you try to find some areas of competency as well, and then we put that together, and we hope you do a good job always.
Do you ask them what
Yes.
they would like to do first? And if those puzzle pieces don't fit, do you ask somebody to move occasionally?
So what we do, even prior to the election, and anybody who has declared candidacy, we send out a questionnaire that asks what committees they'd like to sit on.
Oh,
If
you
they
do
had
this
that
even-
ability.
Okay.
And then we ask them what special qualifications or skills they may have that, may move the board chair or vice chair to make those decisions and put those on those committees. Oftentimes, if we're pretty sure that a committee chair that currently exists will probably be reelected, we might bring them in and say, the committee you currently have, do they work well together? That doesn't mean do they agree. It just means, is there a semblance of order? There's not a disruptive force because you like things to be harmonious if you can. And that doesn't mean agree on the issues. That just means agreeably disagree. We take all that into consideration. And then the last thing we take into consideration, although I always have, county board chair can do, I guess, whatever they want, is geographic location. It doesn't make sense to me, for instance, to have every single member of the Public Safety Committee, let's say, be from Wisconsin Rapids, when a large part of the population is from Marshfield, maybe some different interests, some different concerns. So, lastly, when we look at this, we try to find some balance geographically as well.
In the amount of people that
In the amount of people, yeah. Every one of those committees are 5-member committees. So, you try to have some balance that way. Doesn't always work that direction, but, that's always one of the goals.
Do all meet at the courthouse?
Generally speaking. Most meetings are at the courthouse or at the River Block building down there. We do have some committees that rotate. They might meet up here a month, down in Rapids a month. The HERC committee, again, which is Park and Forestry and Highway, they meet out on site during the year at different places. They meet at the different parks. They do highway tours so they can see the roads that we're looking at working on, the ones that are in disrepair, those that have just been done. But generally speaking, they meet in Rapids. And the reason for that is staff is in Rapids. And so without having to pay mileage and overtime or comp time, we tend to meet where they're working.
Talking with Wood County Board Chairman Lance Blimmel here on today's Insight program this third Friday in the month of April. You can join us live on the radio, 384-2192, 384-2192. Or if you were watching us here on MFLD TV, David Ballerstein, our camera operator here today as part of the MFLD TV crew. And we come to you on Channel 989, I believe it is, or one of those in the 990, 91 up in that area of community channels on the Inside program. We're in a regular rotation here. But Lance avails himself to us here once a month to ask questions. And coming off an election, it's time to get resettled again. Now, you said that you are not going, you step away. So
temporarily, hopefully.
How often does that happen?
Every 2 years. At the election, every 2 years, new board chair, vice chair, and second vice chair are selected. Committees are appointed, and then those committees elect their chairs, and that happens every 2 years. It's
on a city council, it goes uneven, odd.
Yeah,
as far as every other year election, who comes up? Is it every time everybody on the council or
it's every
commission?
every member every 2 years. So that can create some disruption, especially if there's a single issue in a county that's driving a lot of discussion. We've seen boards, Buffalo County a number of years ago, basically every single board member lost an election. and it was based on a single issue. The problem with that is oftentimes the single issue gets solved pretty quickly, and then you got a whole bunch of board members that aren't interested in the work that boards typically do. You hope you can get them on board and to pay attention to the other stuff. But one of the things I'd be, Jeff, remiss of is if I didn't mention is we have some county board supervisors that served a long time that are no longer going to be on the board. Right up here in the Marshfield area, Mike Fire has been an outstanding member of our county board for many, many years. He's familiar to all the people in Marshfield through his service to the county board, through the city council. And Mike is going to be leaving the board. And Mike, I know personally I can't thank you enough for the service, and I know the people in the courthouse feel the same way, probably those you represented. Bob Ashbeck, who served out of the Millador area for 20 years, is leaving the board, another valuable member that really brought forth the issues from the agricultural community. And Bob is going to be no longer a member of the board. Those are tough to replace. There's a lot of years of expertise there. We're lucky in the Marshfield area. One of the people coming onto the board has previously served on the board, so there is some familiarity there. And then we had Ken Curry, who chaired our conservation education committee down out of the Wisconsin Rapids area, Buren. Ken decided he was going to step away this year, and that was one of those seats that nobody ran, and so it's an appointment that the county board chairman gets to make with confirmation by the full board at the following meeting.
You talk about people who have done this before. Generally, they step away or take some time off, but some of them have just gotten put into different with redistricting. I've heard that in other counties, maybe more so than here, but explain how that works now. We've had turmoil on the maps at the state level and at the federal level, but what happens at your county level?
Yeah, and we're still not done. At the county level, obviously, you have redistricting. That occurred, and those maps were in place for this election. So when that occurs, sometimes you have supervisors who have served for many, many years that all of a sudden now live in the same district, and one is running against the other. That occurs. It also happens, when that happens, sometimes we have a vacancy in a district where there wasn't a candidate. I think a real good example is a number of years ago, when our county board went from 38 members to 19 members by referendum to 19 districts, every supervisor basically had a race against an incumbent. And I think there was one district where we actually 3 incumbents ended up in a single district. So, that occurs. That happens. So you have some that decide just not to run. I'm going to step away. And believe me, when people think you go to a county board meeting and you sit there for an hour and a half or 2 hours, that's the job. Well, it isn't, and nor is it on a town board or a city council. I don't think I'd be exaggerating if I said in the course of a week I get 500 pages that I have to read. I guess you don't have to, but if you don't, you're not informed. So you have to, sift through that. You have to be able to pick up the information there. You have conversations with department heads. There's a lot of work that goes into it. And I think some of those people say, I've done my part. I've served 10 years or 15 years, and now it's time for somebody else to step up, take that mantle and run with it. And it's a commitment. I encourage people to run. I encourage them to get involved within their community, whether they be on appointed committees or it's an elected individual. But it is a commitment. And you're right. So some of them say, I'm going to step away. I'll give you an example up here right in Marshfield. Ed Wagner was a county board supervisor for many, many years. And Ed, the workload just got to the point where he said, I don't want to do this. And he stepped away. And then a term later, I think it was only one term later, maybe 2, said, I'm rejuvenated. I'm ready to go. And Ed has chaired our executive committee, or now it's called our operations committee, which handles most of the financial issues for the county. But sometimes it's just, I need to step back. I need to spend time with my family. I have to take care of whether it be, personal issues, family issues, health issues, whatever, and then they come back. And that happens as well. So one of the things I'm looking forward to is, you have a new mayor here. It's somebody who I have not worked with. I don't know. And one of the things that I do in my capacity is make sure that I develop those relationships with, the mayors, to some extent city councils, but it's more often mayors that I deal with, town board chairman, village presidents, because we have the next 2 years we're going to be working together, hand in glove on issues.
Bringing it to you, or are you taking it to them?
Both ways.
Which way does information flow generally?
Both directions. There's some things that are, let's use Marshfield for an example. I mean, there's some issues that percolate here in Marshfield, and it kind of flows down to the county. It's a county issue as well. There's other things that we have in the county that might be state or federally mandated that certainly affect Marshfield, and those come from the county the other direction. And the goal always is to have open conversation. And for a lot of years, for instance with Chris Meyer, we developed a relationship over many, many years. You talk, regularly, and you discuss those issues. We have a new mayor who I don't know. I'm sure those lines of communication will be wide open, and we'll have those. But we have Steve Barg here, your administrator, who's been around for a long time. And Steve updates me on issues that are going on in Marshfield, and we certainly try to do the same the other direction. We also have departments that the city might not have where we can lend our service or our expertise to help them out if it's an issue they don't deal with regularly.
Talking with Lance Plimmel, Wood County Board Chairman, here this third Friday in the month of April. You know that if you're listening live, but if you're watching us on TV here on MFLD, you could be watching us in video online at their online locations, including on YouTube or through the city's website, or as I say on TV, 989, 9091 on the Charter Spectrum digital tier up above. But you can give us a call here live on the radio. We'll talk more with Lance Plimmel in just a moment. Don't go away. You're listening to AM 1450, FM 98.7 WDLB, or you could be watching us on MFLD TV, Marshfield TV, through the City Communications Network, which is on the internet with their YouTube channel or through the city's website. Or they've got a nice little video player site that I go to that you go through the city site and you can look at all three channels. You can watch them live as they're happening, or you can go back and grab videos that you want to watch at any given time. If you get bogged down in a meeting.
I've actually done that.
Don't you think you wish you could during the live meeting? Fast forward?
There are times. Yes, there are.
Okay, let's get to the meat of the situation here. Okay, let's go. Talking with Lance Plimmel, Wood County Board Chairman here, and we're just coming off of the elections and just interested in how that plays out. In now you've talked about the not only installation as this county board supervisor, but committees, and you actually talked to them before they got on, and to see their interest, that kind of shortens up the timeline a little bit here on what you think may happen as far as that, and it may or may not be you. I don't know, even that part of it.
No, absolutely. And I think it's important that you have that conversation with those newly elected, whether they be incumbents and longtime serving or newly elected people that have never served on the board, and see what their areas of interest are. Now, those are no promise that you're going to end up, at your first choice or second choice. But if it can be accommodated, it's greatly helpful because, I just know from experience, if that's your area of interest, you're going to be much more involved than if it's something you really don't care about. And so, we make every effort to try to balance that. Now, most people put on 2 to 3 choices. We have a county board rule that says you can only serve on 2 of the major committees.
How many do you have?
1, 2, 3, 4, 6, I believe. So there are some that serve on 1. There's some that serve on 2. Nobody can serve on 3. So
19 people among 6 committees.
Yeah, with 5 people on each committee. So
you'd have basically 3, right?
Yeah, I should probably count those committees. I think at least 6. I've got operations, and I've got our Highway Infrastructure Committee, and we've got our Human Services Committee and our Judicial and Legislative Committee and our PIT
Who else?
We've got 7, I guess, now. So,
other than board supervisors, who else is on those? How big are some of those?
The committees are all 5-member committees, with the exception of a couple that are statutorily required to have citizen members. So our Human Services Committee, for instance, they have citizen members, and those are usually a doctor, a nurse, psychologist, psychiatrist, or somebody that brings expertise from those areas. Statutorily required that there's a public member on our Seed Committee, which usually is from the agricultural community. So there's some of those, but yeah, it gets tough. It's a little bit tough. You certainly want to try to accommodate people. You want them to be happy at the end of the day. And sometimes we have a conversation with somebody, say, I know you'd really like to be here. And I'm sure this is any county board chairman said, I know you'd like to be here, but I was looking at your background, and I see what you've been involved with. And this particular committee over here is responsible for 30% of the entire county budget, $40 million. And I think that your expertise there would be extremely valuable. And sometimes you explain that, they go, yeah, that would work. That would be a good fit. I'd enjoy that. My goal at the end of the day, and I'm sure every county board chairman across the state is, try to keep people happy.
Well, that's the other thing. You don't want people to go, oh, shoot, I don't want to go in there. This sucks. I don't want to have to do this. Because when you come into it, then you got an attitude already.
And then there's personal dynamics in those committees.
Oh, yeah.
Oftentimes, they may be a perfect fit there, but if you have two people that, they're going to be at loggerheads all the time, you're never going to have agreement. They're going to argue throughout committee meetings. It's probably not a good fit because nothing's going to get accomplished. At the end of the day, we need to get things done. And again, I really want to make clear, that doesn't mean they have a different opinion on issues. Those are, when I talk about personal issues, where we're just not going to have a committee that works well together. So you try to take that into consideration as well.
Getting back to, I know you probably answered this earlier in the program, how does a person become the chairman of that committee? Usually
the members of the committee, and I think our board this term is going to be a good example. You have, for the most part, highly experienced supervisors coming back in that role. They know who on a committee or whom they've worked with in the county elsewhere, exhibits those leadership skills, the ability to run a meeting, the ability to coalesce, to bring people together, to compromise, collaborate, and bring things forward. You also learn who might not have that ability. So when those committees sit down, they elect that chairman. From my perspective, it's almost like the cabinet for the President of the United States. Let's say, if you're the county board chair, you have a vice chair and a second vice chair. Those committee chairs are people you meet with regularly. They're the ones that typically have dialogue with different department heads. So no individual county board member can go into a department and demand they do something. Stuff is done by committee. Usually that message is, in that conversation, usually happens between the committee chair and the department head or the department itself. So it's important, and it's important that they elect somebody who has the ability to verbalize that. If they get called by the press on an issue, you certainly want somebody that's informed, and you want somebody that's not going to say something that's going to be detrimental to the department or county interest or any other. So you hope they do their due diligence, but usually over the course, especially this year with our board, they've worked with that person for the last minimally 2 years, in some cases many years, and leadership starts to emerge. And typically that is the person who's elected.
Talking about committees, as they call them in your vernacular, cities' commissions or something along that line, that's a part of being elected to these offices. You talk about you want good people to run. The commitment, you use the term, I can't make it. I mean, the problem is I see a lot of retired people doing it because you hold the meetings at a time when a working person works.
Yeah, and that's something we talk about every time. And I'll put on my other hat here for a second, Jeff. I'm the president of the Wisconsin Counties Association, so I deal with all 72 counties and their board chairs fairly often. And this is one of those issues that every one of these county board chairs wrestles with. So we often say we'd like, if you had daytime meetings, it would be better, you'd have more involvement. And we have actually found in many counties it's just the opposite. That younger person who has a family, 30, 40-year-old, 20-year-old, it's much easier for them to miss work than it is for them to tell their significant other, their wife, their husband, or their kids they're not going to the kids' basketball game or to the singing event or the choir or those other things that tend to happen every day because life gets in the way. And we have found that most county board members, especially if you ask, really have a commitment of probably 2 to 3 partial days a month. And most of the employers are really happy to have somebody representing not their business, but they're on the county board, so they have a conduit to a county board member if they have a question on an issue that faces us. And we have found that it's much easier for people to get to those meetings during the day than it is to miss the kids' stuff at night. And then, so when committees are set, and they meet, they elect their chair, they also get together and they say, what's a good time for us to meet? What's beneficial to all you? What's a time that's easiest for everybody here? And then we also take into account staff time. Some of those committees don't require a lot of staff time, but typically, 3, 4, 5 departments report to a typical committee. And if you bring in the department head, a deputy director, and then somebody who has some expertise in an area, again, you're paying overtime or comp time to every one of those people that's there at 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. there's a lot of employees. We have, round number 700, county employees. Not all those come to meetings, obviously, but a lot of those, if you direct a certain aspect of a department, you might be called upon to be at that meeting. If it's during the workday, they're there. Otherwise, it starts driving costs. So it's a balance we try to look at.
Yeah, I understand. I guess now, as I look at it, but you have then eliminated a lot of people, maybe good possible people who just say, I'm not going to ask my employer to do that, or I just have too much of a workload that I want to get done in order to do that, to give up my days in order to be on that. And not every employer is like the National Guard employer who says, thank you for your service.
No, absolutely. Not everyone. Although, I can tell you it's gotten easier over the last few years. And part of that is right now you have the ability to participate virtually in meetings. We have that, accommodation, which makes it easier. You don't have to drive somewhere if you don't want to, other than the full county board meeting. You can tune in. So the opportunities exist in that way. You also, it's kind of funny because you have some younger people that say, I can't get away from work. I understand that. They also have the child commitment and the other stuff at night. I've also had supervisors on the other end that say, I can't drive after dark. so it's kind of funny. We hear that both directions. But I can tell you, every county has wrestled with this and thought about it. And, I remember one time somebody said, well, why don't we move county board meetings from Rapids to Marshfield to Rapids and rotate back and forth? Well, first of all, I'm not going to be popular for saying this in Marshfield, but Wisconsin Rapids happens to be the county seat, and every county has a county seat. And all the technology that we have available, all of the cameras, all the screens, all the staff that comes in to run those meetings happens to be in Wisconsin Rapids. So we typically don't do that. But I remember one instance where we did have a meeting in Marshfield. We said, let's run in one in Marshfield. Let's see how this goes. And we thought we'd have fairly large public participation. And it was kind of a funny story, but I brought my son along. He was probably 10 or 11 years old, so he could see what happened at a county board meeting. He was the only person at the county board meeting. We had it up at the UW up here. It was kind of funny, and the press interviewed him after the meeting, and they said, his name's Matthew, and they said, so Matthew, what did you like most about the meeting? And it was Dairy Month. He goes, I like the donuts and the orange juice. So it's unless there's an issue that is of particular interest to a group of people, normally there's not a large public presence at a full county board meeting. And probably because the input, where that sausage is made, so to speak, are committee meetings. And that's where the public, if they really want to have input, although we allow public comment at every meeting, the input really occurs at the committee meeting where it's getting discussed. Once it gets put into the form of a resolution and it goes to the county board floor, probably just like the state legislature, U.S. Senate, you don't hear about the ones that are agreed upon by everybody, but that's probably 95% of the resolutions that come forward are passed unanimously. And then there's that 5% that create considerable debate, and that's when we get people that show up at the meeting and make public comment. But that is really not a regular occurrence.
How much of a vote percentage of the board has to be in order to pass a resolution?
Well, there's a couple of different rules. Generally, you have to have the majority, so 51% would
right.
be. There are some votes that require a supermajority, and that's when you're looking to either, borrow money, to spend money out of contingency. There are some financial issues that require that supermajority to pass. But generally speaking, if it's just a general resolution, it requires just a majority. So a tie vote is a negative vote. That resolution does not pass. I have not watched. Do you do that with electronic voting?
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, we just switched systems. We were one of the first counties in the state to actually use the electronic voting system, where you could vote right from your iPad. And that system became more costly recently, and we've gone back to one. It actually has 3 buttons on your desk. It looks like a key fob. And it's a yes, no, abstain is basically what it says on the keypad, which is, it seems like we're going backwards in that respect because we kind of had that when we started, but it's just become a much more affordable system. It works well. If you look at the boards, and whether the city council room or the county boardroom, they're up on display screens, different monitors, so you can see the vote. You can see who made the motion, who seconded the motion, when it's under discussion, and then the vote totals get posted once all votes are in. So prior to that, you can't see how another supervisor has voted.
And then you move forward from there, and then it's done?
Then it's done. And we move on to the next issue. So in a typical board meeting, I'd say we probably have 4 or 5 of those resolutions that come forward. There are some meetings where we have 10, 12, 15 resolutions, but most of those are simple budget transfers. Moving money from one line. A department realizes that they might be over in a single area, but they have money somewhere else within the budget that they weren't spending. It's going to be better spent, a health department budget for somewhere else. Maybe not somewhere over here, but for vaccinations, for instance. I'm just using that as an example. And it gets slid over. That takes a resolution to do the budget amendment. Those are usually taken all together. The supervisor read ahead of time. We're moving $1,000 from the left hand to the right hand. No additional money. Those occur sometimes in bunches.
And everyone requires a separate vote?
No. They require a separate vote, but we will take those resolutions together. So what will happen is the clerk will read 5, 6, 7 of those together. I will ask if there's any objection to taking these together. They've been read by the supervisors ahead of time. If there's one that needs to be pulled because it's going to take debate, we pull that out, and then we'll take 4 or 5 of them together in a single vote. But everyone is read separately on the floor, and they're all done by separate action.
Talking with Lance Plimmel, Wood County Board Chairman here, about how the business works, and getting a civics lesson myself here, because I don't, and like I would presume most people, avail myself to the medium that we're on here even, and watching things as it's more available to us now than probably at any time ever. Through technology, you can have it on your phone or even on your watch, I suppose, if you have one. Done not only live, but also in replay of what's happening on county board business. But just winding things through. Now, you said you vote on resolutions. Is there anything that you vote on that is not? I mean, do resolutions have to come through a committee?
The answer, again, is generally speaking, yes. There's an occasional resolution that may come from the county board chair. For instance, would be appointment of the fire wardens, within the county. Those are typically come directly off of my desk, but almost without exception comes from a committee.
They have to be accepted by the board? Fire wardens?
Yes. Yeah, it's always amazing because then I forget who was appointed, and then I call my own township and I don't remember who the fire warden is, and I have to call the county clerk. Go, who am I calling? And then he says, "Well, you appointed him," and I go, "Yeah, I forgot." But those things happen. And the other thing that's important is, county boards adopt rules, but generally speaking, you use Robert's Rules of Order and you follow parliamentary procedure. There are some minor exceptions to that, and those are rules adopted by a board that might be a slight exception to those rules. So, understanding Robert's Rules of Order and parliamentary procedure is kind of important. And so one of the things that we appoint when we do those committee appointments is a parliamentarian. We always have our corporation counsels in the room to answer questions, but if there's a point of order or something, it's often addressed by the parliamentarian in the room.
So generally it's motion, second, discussion, vote?
Yes, and I find this exactly. And what's kind of, I think, funny about that is, like anybody else in the community, I think, you're involved in different organizations, and you sit in those meetings, and all of a sudden, I was sitting in one the other day, and it was, they said, "Let's vote." Okay, who wants to make a motion? I went, whoa. You need the motion and the second before you vote. You don't get to vote first and then and they keep messing up. And I've actually been in meetings where they say, "All right, obviously can you just run the meeting?" So from an order standpoint, from a parliamentary procedure, you don't have any real input. But yeah, you say let's do this the right way. It's kind of hard to have discussion after you took the vote and it passed.
It's hard to have discussion after a motion, because to me the discussion comes before. Otherwise, you don't know what motion you're going to make. There's got to be some discussion ahead of time in order to talk about, okay, should I make a motion of this here? Yeah,
so from a county board perspective, the only thing that you're typically acting on are resolutions that have already been provided to you through the committee process in the packet that you get almost a week before the county board meeting to look at, to call the department heads, to ask any questions that you'd have. So typically, and by Robert's Rules of Order, to have the discussion, you have to have a motion on the floor. Now, there's discussions we have that aren't related to a resolution. Somebody just brings something up and you want to discuss it, talk about it for future agendas, for items that you're going to deal with going forward. A supervisor might just have something of interest that they want to share. But what we discuss when it gets to the full county board, when you're talking about a motion, a second, discussion, and then the decision on that resolution, that's been in everybody's hands for a period of time.
Talking with Lance Plimmel, Wood County Board Chairman, here on today's program. You can, too, live on WDLB, 384-2192, 384-2192. You may be watching us on MFLD TV, Marshfield City Communications, on the Spectrum Digital tier, or on the Internet as well. WDLB's Inside program here this third Friday in the month of April. You know that if you're listening live, but you may be watching us here on video. This is a monthly meeting we have with the Wood County Board Chairman Lance Plimmel, unless you're out on some meeting somewhere. Anything recent here that you've been going, traveling, doing, meeting?
Well, at this time of year, we start to travel again quite a bit for the Counties Association, not so much for our county specifically.
Do you travel in the state then?
I travel in the state and I travel out of the state. So, one of the things that will happen again at the county level is county boards, each county will elect their leadership, committees will get set, and those move forward. And then the Counties Association has a board of directors, and those are elected on a district level. So all those meetings are going to start, I believe the first one's on about the 27th. They run like the 27th, 28th. I don't have a calendar in front of me. And then the rest of the districts the following week. And they elect leadership for their district, which represents the Wisconsin Counties Association, which is really the place that probably has the most interaction with the state legislature. Those are people that deal directly through our lobbying efforts with the state. So that's when things coming up. But the big thing we're dealing with right now, and it's a good problem. We've been given money by the federal government. I don't know where they got it from because it really doesn't exist. But we have it. I mean, we physically have a check. I assume it's going to not bounce. But the county ended up with about $14.1 million in ARPA funding. So through the rescue plan, and we're looking at, we have a committee set up, and that committee will change a little bit again, too, right after, we seat new committee members. But, how do we spend that money? And, there's a couple of things that we've ascertained at this point is, generally speaking, that money was supposed to be allocated for certain things. And we didn't spend it right away because we saw the federal government was starting to take some of the sideboards off, some of the rules. So when it first came out, it said it could be used for infrastructure, but not roads or bridges. It could only be used for sewer and water. Well, counties, generally speaking, don't have sewer or water. And then there are smaller municipalities that got, let's say, $100,000. And there were reporting requirements that were unbelievably onerous. And you're going, geez, was it worth getting the money? So we kind of, bide our time a little bit as this went on. And I had several meetings out in Washington with other people and groups of people. It's not like I did this, where we said, we can't have these rules. We need to be able to spend money where we have made the decision it's most necessary to be spent. And so what the federal government did eventually is they said, we're going to take those rules away from the first $10 million you get. Well, 2,300 of the 3,100 counties in the country got less than $10 million. So for all practical purposes, if it's a legal situation, you can spend the money on it. There's things you can't do, legally, but generally speaking, you can spend it on roads, bridges, infrastructure, programs, whatever you want. So our county, $10 million of the $14 million is basically unfettered. We can spend that on what we see as the greatest need. My concern in the committees as we've met is that we spend it on things where 20 years from now, somebody looks back and says that money was spent wisely, the county did a good job, there's a legacy, and that it created some economic development. So right now the thought is, although there are some very specific infrastructure needs that we might have to address with a small amount of that, we want to do things where there's a return on investment. So, can we, and I don't mean we personally build, but can we put in place the infrastructure where additional new housing stock is built? Can we facilitate new businesses come into the area? We're looking for, if we spend $1 million here, 20 years down the road, is there a $20 million return on that? Because housing was built, property tax base was expanded. Those are the kind of things that we're looking at right now. Some of that might fall into the areas of recreation, tourism, those areas we're going to see return. So we're starting that discussion. We have almost 3 more years to decide where it's going to get spent, and then we have a full 2 years beyond that to spend the money.
That money didn't come with a crystal ball. I mean, how are you going to know just best practices, I guess?
I don't. And that's why, we're starting to engage. We've certainly engaged the county board supervisors and the department heads. And at our last meeting, our ARPA funding meeting, one of the decisions made is, at least for me at this point in time, to reach out to those municipalities and see what can we do where we can leverage money. Is there something that would benefit you as well as us? And one of the requirements of the money is it actually has to be a benefit to the county as well. In other words, I can't give $1 million. Let's use Marshfield as an example. So Marshfield, it doesn't benefit the county in some way. So it has to be mutually beneficial. But we're reaching out to those people, and that's one of the conversations I'm going to have with your new mayor is there something we can do jointly that benefits both of us? And those conversations will happen with town boards, town chairmen, mayors, city council people, because we've got some time to do this. So there will be the occasional emergent need. I'll give you an example. A generator, for instance, maybe wasn't budgeted at a 24/7 operation like a nursing home or a medical facility, where if the generator, if something happens to it, if it doesn't function, we got to buy one right now. Some of that money could be used for that. That could be emergent. I'm guessing that the board would probably allocate some of those dollars for that purpose. But we're looking at long range. How do we best use this money? And so 20 years from now, they don't look back and say, well, that was a bunch of clowns that got $14 million and didn't spend it wisely.
Well, I got to say, and you probably would agree, that there was a time when this wasn't even a problem. I mean, it's a pleasant problem bridge to be crossing here, that you're doing something that you can leave, as you used the word legacy here, because there were times when it was hand to mouth. I mean, you fix stuff, put a pothole in and hope that it stayed because you didn't have enough to mix it and do it again. This is unprecedented in your time.
It is, and as grateful as we are to have that money and as beneficial it is to our area, it's also creating some long-term federal problems that you're seeing. I mean, you don't have to look very far. Go to the grocery store. Go fill up your tank with gas. Go out and shop. I mean, it's tremendous inflation has been created by the amount of money that's been pumped into, the whole system. And the money, you look at the national debt, the money didn't exist. It's not like we took it out of a savings account, and it has to come from somewhere else. And that's either going to come from an increase in tax revenue or user fees or, some other means. But that those dollars, counties don't have the ability, nor local units of government, to print money. The federal government does. The more of it they print, the less it's worth. And so, although it's a benefit to us here locally from a government perspective, there are people out there that are going to suffer in other ways because of that. So my goal is to have the benefit outweigh, the negative side of that, and that's why we're having those discussions. And that's where we bring the community in, because 75,000 minds out there are certainly going to have some ideas that we as 19 members didn't have, and hopefully some really good ideas.
Talking with Lance Plima, Wood County Board Chair, here on today's Inside program this third Friday in the month of April. You can too, 384-2192, 384-2192 on today's program here, where you can ask him the questions that you would like to know about as far as business on the county level. This one isn't, but I would be interested to, I guess, not necessarily a personal take, but from the county hat here. We had a situation where there was money taken by a clerk that wasn't put into the city coffers the way it was coming down. And the judge sits in Wisconsin Rapids, and the clerk is in Marshfield. And it was his, according to the way it's been described to me, his issue to make sure that she was doing what she was supposed to be doing with this money. Have you been involved at all or in any kind of oversight on how that's going to flow now?
No. It's interesting. You get those issues, and there was a really big one to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. It might have even been millions up in Eau Claire County, where over a period of many, many years, a lot of money was absconded with. And it took a long time to run that through the whole process. But so one of the things is the circuit court branches are in Wisconsin Rapids, and we handle those cases. Obviously, if the judges don't think they can handle that, in a way which they're disassociated from the case or the people, that gets moved to another county, or we bring in a substitute judge from somewhere else to look at that. I heard on the periphery some of the basics of this case. I'm not involved in it at all. I really don't know, any of the details or the minutia, involved in that one.
How much does the board have to do with the legal system? I mean, just because their offices are there,
None.
None. Yeah.
Yeah. When I say none, I mean there are. So judges, elected obviously countywide. Judges are compensated by the state of Wisconsin, but there are some assistants within those offices that are county employees. So when I say we have no oversight, that's not true. I mean, judges have a lot of leeway, and they can demand a lot of things within the courthouse. They have the ability to demand certain things in certain courtrooms for security and for other reasons. But there are some of the employees that work within those departments that have direct county board oversight. So, for instance, the clerk of courts, although that's elected, that entire department has the oversight of our judicial and legislative committee. They report to them, they get updates, and they have those meetings. Judges come to meetings occasionally too because they want something done from a capital improvement standpoint that would come out of county coffers. There are some things though that they actually can demand that typically go along the lines of security and some of those other issues like that. But we have no input with judges, and they typically. I mean, I know all of them. We talk to all of them, but it's a more distant relationship in that respect, and that's true with all elected offices. There's constitutional officers where you have oversight of the budget within their office, but I can't tell. And when I say the board can't tell the county clerk or the clerk of courts or the treasurer, the register of deeds, the sheriff, to some extent, all of those constitutional officers. You can't tell them directly what to do. They're elected by the people, but they do have a staff and they do have a budget. So we control the purse strings, but we don't control the person. So you certainly try to establish those relationships with those people so they're good relationships. They feel comfortable coming to you, and you feel comfortable going to them when an issue arises.
I think I see where a lot of this has gone south in other cases across the state. When you talk about personality conflicts or things like that, where people have a political view and they're going this way, and the board or the rest of the people are going, no, we're not doing that, and the ire gets up quickly.
And Jeff, it happens more often in the larger, urban areas, because although local elections are supposed to be nonpartisan, partisanship plays into that. And you're right. And that's the one thing that creates a lot of turmoil and a lot of problems, and you certainly try to avoid that at all costs. And sometimes people say to me, well, you're not going to reprimand them because you know them and you like them. Well, first of all, I can't reprimand them. They're elected by the people. You tend to get to know them and like them because you work with them. And, one of the conversations I have with county board supervisors all the time, not just in my own county, but across the state, I often have times people say to me, you have power. You don't have any power as a county board. I get one vote, like everybody else, a single vote. I typically don't get to weigh in on an issue on the board floor. My job is to make sure the meeting runs effectively and efficiently. But what you do have, if you play your cards right, if you learn to work well with other people, like I said, if you collaborate, if you compromise, if you do all of those things, you tend to maybe gain some influence or at least some respect, whether that be a clerk of courts or a register of deeds or a county clerk, you tend to depend on each other. You develop trust, and you know that you can rely on that person. When that goes away, all bets are off. So when people say to me, well, you're a friend of, I am, but I can tell you right now, I was not a friend of any single person who sits in any of those offices before they came to that office. It was something that was developed through, respect and time, and working with that person, finding out, their areas of expertise. I've never been out to dinner with any of them. None of them have ever been to my house, but I would consider them all good friends.
Talking with Lance Plimmel, Wood County Board Chair here on WDLB. We just have a minute or two left here. Something that I didn't realize is that Donna Rozar is still on the county board and also in the state assembly. How does that? Are the meetings different times, or how do you accommodate for that?
Yeah, she works. She works around it. And I'd say Marshfield's extremely lucky that they have somebody who has a voice on the county board and within the state legislature. And she's not alone in that respect. There are others. There's not a lot. But there are others, and it gives you insight at the local level. I occasionally get amazed when somebody says to me, a state legislator, and this happened in the past, can you tell me what's going on in the county? I'm going, well, you represent the county. You probably ought to know what's going on in the county. Representative Rose Ardana, she knows both ends of it. She has influence in Madison. She has influence, at the county level. Scott Krug, who represents the district that really encompasses Wisconsin Rapids. Scott's a fairly long-time state representative who was just elected to the Adams County Board of Supervisors. Again, I think it's so that maybe they get a better grasp of what's going on in the area. But what is important, I'll share real quick when we have a minute, is I'm amazed when I have county board chairs and people around the state say, I don't talk to my sheriff, or this comes to the president, or I wouldn't talk to my state representative. I go, well, if you aren't, you're not doing your job. So let's all get in the same room and, take the gloves off. Let's have a conversation and do what's best for the people of the county, the area, the region, the community.
Yeah, it's getting tougher nowadays with partisanship and such that people don't talk. I find the stories that I hear about, well, you're a Republican acting like a Democrat. I'm like, well, act like a representative. I'm not worried about who's outside of the sphere of my taxpayer, who you're beholden to. Whatever that is. And being on both, you got to be like a meeting maniac if you're going to be on.
You do, and those people have energy beyond belief. They live for that, and it's a lot of hours and a lot of commitment. But I think if you look at those people, you're going to find those are those people you've known over your life that sleep like 4 hours a day, and they run 100 miles an hour in every direction.
All right. Well, good to talk to you again. I'm always happy that you come by.
Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate the opportunity to be up here in Marshfield.
Wood County Board Chairman Lance Plimmel on today's Insight program this third Friday of the month of April here on WDLB.